Hi there, welcome to another training session on Decisions version 8. In this session, we will learn about reports and some of the advanced concepts in reports. So these are some of the things that we will learn in this session. We will learn how to create charts in decisions reports, how to add calculated columns, how to add conditional formatting, applying rules, how to create parent-child relationship between multiple reports, and how we can call reports via APIs. And before we get started, I would give a quick overview of how we create reports and what are the benefits of reports. So reports and decisions version 8 are created in a visual designer, just like the previous versions. And we can add grouping, filtering on the report data, which we have. And then we can use the report to kind of take some user actions and perform some functions depending on what the user selects and clicks on. Now, there are different ways to use reports. One of the very common way is to use a report on dashboard to show the different records that we have in a report. The other would be in a workflow when we want to capture the data that we have in the report and use that within the flow. And third could be to run these reports to kind of run at a particular day and time so that an email can be sent or a file can be generated on that report data on that particular day and time. And we can also call reports external to decisions via API calls. Now, there are four major sections that you would see in a report designer. One is the data source, where you add the table from which you will be pulling the information that you want to project on the report. And then the second one would be the filters, where we can kind of filter in some information on the report. And then in the data field section, we add all the columns that we would want to be added in our report. And in the views, we have the ability to kind of project the data on some chart or some sort of a different view, which can be a matrix table or rich text. And this is a properties panel that we get in the reports on any of the columns which we have selected. So we can configure it according to our need. We can add formatting, we can make it visible or hide it, and we can do some more actions and settings on this property panel. So now what I'll do is I'll jump onto my Decision Studio, and we will create a report, add source, and then we will learn some bunch of advanced concept that we have in Decisions Reports version 8. So I'm on my Decision Studio, and this is how Decision Studio looks like in version 8. We have this properties, this folder panel on the left. So I can collapse it and start working on my designer folder. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create a report, and we will call it, say, applicant loan request report. And I click create. Now, as I click on create, it takes us to the report designer. And as I was mentioning a bit ago, that we get these four sections: add source, filters, the data fields, and the views. And this is where we would actually be able to see the data. And on the right-hand side, we get this property panel, so we can add some settings and configurations to this report that we are building. On top, we get some user actions like save. We can run report, check the history, and also add checkpoints. So we'll start by adding the data source here. And in the search, I'm going to look for applicant. And this is the data structure we would want to pull information from on this report. And we'll add some fields. Let's go ahead and add user ID, the employment status of an applicant, their salary, their other income, the loan that we are requesting, and then the loan rank, date of birth, and lastly, the credit score. So this is the data that we'll play with on this report. Now you will notice that some of the columns have the data which is not formatted at all, and we would want to make it a little more clean. So what we can do is we can select on any of these fields for which we want to format the data. So let's say in this case, I want to format how the salary looks. So I select that data field, come to the properties panel, scroll down, and I get an option to choose currency. So that's what I'm going to do for other income as well. And lastly, for the requested loan amount, as these are all the decimals and the representation of currency. So I'm going to use that format. And we can also add formatting to date of birth. Right now, it also shows us the time. We don't want the time. So I can pick any of the formats that are available. So I'm going to pick short date. Now I'll just go ahead and save my report so I do not lose any changes that I have made just now. So in this report, what we have done is very basic at this moment, and we learn about some advanced concepts. And the first thing we would learn is how to add color rule to highlight some particular rows or cells in the report. So let's say we want to highlight the credit score for the applicants who have credit score of less than or equal to 100. So I'll come here, select this credit score, scroll down, and click on Add. Now, when I do that, Decision shows me this dialog box where I can add a rule. So let's go ahead and pick our create rule. So we're going to create a new rule, and we will call it check credit score rule. And when we create, it takes us to our rule designer. So because we will be checking evaluation on credit score, so let's define that in here. And we'll take the type as int and save this. So just like any normal rule, we will check if the credit score is less than or equal to 100. It'll give us a true value. So if it is true, then we'll put some color on that particular column so that it can be highlighted. I come back and I click on update inputs. It asks me what is the column in the report that I want to use as the input. So it will be credit score. And I'll pick the background, let's say yellow, and I hit OK. Now you notice that when I say OK, it gets applied to the report, and you can see that for the credit scores which are less than 100, we will be highlighting them with this color. And I'm going to go ahead and save my report again. So you would notice that this has been applied only for a particular column, and inside that column in a particular cell. So we can also add a rule that's a color rule for the entire row. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll come to the properties section of the report. Then we'll go inside colors and icon and click on add. So here also we get a similar dialog box where we can create a rule. So we can use the rule which we just created, update inputs, I'll pick credit score. And then I can mention the color that I want to highlight for that particular column. So let's say we pick the gray and I say, okay, and refresh my preview. So you will notice that not just for the column, we can also add the color rule for the rows. So for all the rows in which the credit score is less than 100, we can notify that or highlight that with the color. Let me go ahead and save that. So this advanced concept in the reports helps a lot when we want to highlight some information for the end user so they can take some quick decisions or quick actions. So to see how this report would look like to the end user, we can click on Run Report, and that's how the report would look like with all these highlighted colors. So I'm back to my report, and we would look at now the conditional formatting. That's very much similar to applying rules, but the conditional formatting is a quick one, and it can be applied only on the string values or the booleans. So let's see how we can achieve that. So again, I come to the properties panel of the report. And then inside of this, I will expand the grid view and click on conditional formatting and click add. Now you will notice that here it asks me if I want to apply formatting to the column or on the row. So in this case, we can check whichever we want to highlight. So in this case, we will apply to a column, which is the employment status, and the column name is employment status. So we'll say that if the employment status is student, highlight that particular row and make the background as red. So what this helps us to do is it helps us to kind of highlight the rows for which the employment status is a student, so that the end user can just ignore that or kind of flag that record in the report. So let me click OK and refresh. So when I do that, you will notice that the employment status gets changed to this red cell for the student value. And similarly, we can apply the conditional formatting for entire row as well. So let's say I go ahead and select row and click OK, refresh. So it would apply to the entire row. Let me go ahead and save so I do not lose the change which I have made. So this was about the conditional formatting and applying rules that can help us to kind of highlight or color some rows and some columns or even the cells. Now, next, we will look at another concept in decisions reports, which helps us to add a relationship between multiple reports. And that we also refer as parent-child reporting. So we have this report right now of the applicants and their information that they have submitted for the loan request. Now let's have one more report about the same applicant, but in that report, we would track their assets, how many assets they have and what's the net value of those assets that this applicant have, so that whoever the end user is, maybe an underwriter or a policy admin, they can come and take a look if this person is eligible and if they need some more information about that. So in those situations, these parent-child relationship helps a lot, where we can establish relationship and display that on the dashboard. So let me close this and create one more report. And we'll call this applicant assets report. And when I create it again, it takes us to the report designer. I can add the source. I'm going to look for assets and add some data fields here, starting with the user ID, the asset ID, the asset name, and the asset value. So these are the 4 different attributes I would want to track. And we can fix the formatting for asset value by selecting the field and then changing the format to currency. And I can go ahead and save this. Now, we can make this report give us some more information that's already available. So to do that, what we can do is we can organize this into nice groups. So I can group them by the user ID and apply. So you notice that it kind of segregates the different sets of different users in these quick buckets. Now, grouping also helps us to add some count or some summation on the items present in the group. So to do that, I go to the settings or the properties panel of the report, expand results, and click on subtotals. So when I click add, decisions, so this dialog box gives me on which field or the column do I want to perform some aggregation type. So I'm going to perform that on asset value, and I would want to take sum of all the assets for a particular user. And in the display name, I would say total assets value. And we can specify the format. In this case, we'll take currency, say OK, and refresh. So you would notice that we are able to see the sum of all the assets that a particular applicant has. I go ahead and save this. And how the final report would look like is we can see by clicking on Run Report, where we can clearly see in a nice segregated way the total assets for a particular applicant. Come back to our report. And now what we would do is we would create a parent-child relationship between these two reports which we have now. So if we want to add that relationship, one common ID has to be in both the reports. So in our case, it's going to be the user ID. And this is the ID which we will use to link those two reports. So to link report, what I'll do is instead of looking at all the data that this report has, what we'll do is we'll add filter. And we will say user ID equals a particular value. So let's say we change the filter name to UID, which is the user ID. And then here we would select get values from other reports, because this report would act as a child and will be dependent on the parent report. So I can go ahead and save this. And now I'll go back into our parent report, which is applicant loan request. And this is the report that will be sending the user ID to the child report. So I click on user ID, scroll down on properties, and click on send data as filter change. And here I would give the same filter name that I have provided there as UID. I'll go ahead and save this. So the linking has been done. The next thing we would do is project that on a dashboard so we can actually see how it looks like. So we expand the folder structure, go to pages, and create a page. To do that, I click on reports, page, and I give my page a name. This, let's say, applicant data page. I create. Now we come to the page designer and decisions that has this great layout where we can drag and drop these controls and start building our dashboard for the page. So let's add a row so that we can have place for both the reports which we have built, and I click done. So you will see we have two areas here. And we'll start by dragging and dropping this control all report viewer and expand that to the next column. And we'll click on pick or creative font. And I'm going to pick the parent report, which is applicant loan request. And next, we will add one more report, which would be the child report. And we'll pick again and select applicant assets report. We can extend this to the next column and click on save. Now, there are some more things you can do here. For example, you can change the title for the report. Let's say I say assets, and we can make it chromeless. Similarly for this, we will say applicant loan request. And make it chromeless and hit save. So we'll close this. And now We'll add this page to the folder so we can have a look at our dashboard. We will click on page dashboard, add page dashboard, and then we'll pick the page which we have just built and save. And we click back on the dashboard. So this is the dashboard with 2 reports which we have just created. You can see this is our parent report that has information about all the applicants with their user IDs, and it holds the conditional formatting and the color rules which we have applied. And in the assets, you can see the assets for a particular applicant. So if I click on user ID 108, you would see what are the different assets this user has. They have only 2, and this is the sum of all the assets they have. Let's say if I go ahead with 106, we can see they have just 1, and their total asset value is 2000. So using this method and this concept in decisions, we can interlink multiple reports as we see in this case. So we'll go back into our report and look at a couple of more advanced concepts. So we are back into our parent report, the main report. So by default, we get this sort of a view where we have records in a tabular form. But let's say on a particular report, you want to also have graphics like a pie chart or a bar chart. So we can have those sort of views by clicking on add and choosing what kind of view are we looking at. So first, we would group something. So in this case, I'm interested in checking how many applications do we have for the employed ones and how many do we have for the unemployed ones. Or you can also check how many people applied for the first loan and for how many people it's their second loan. So let's create a group on loan rank and apply. The next thing we'll do is we'll click on add. And now you notice that in charts, we have different options that we can check and use. So let's say we want to use something called pie chart. And it'll take the count of the loan ranks, how many users are the first rankers, how many are the second rankers. And we can also give the title. Let's say loan rank chart. And we can go ahead and click OK. Now you will notice that we get this nice chart which has representation of the first time loan applicants and the second time loan applicants. And we can use this view of the same report which we are building and project it on our dashboard. So I click on save so that we have the changes saved. And I close out of the report designer and go inside the page designer, because that's where we would be adding this pie chart. So what we would do is we would drag and drop a control called report viewer. And we would do some settings here. Now we'll come to the properties section here and we click on view. In the view mode, we will checkbox charts, and in the default view, we will pick charts, and in the view, we'll again put charts. We'll go ahead and save, and just to confirm if the changes have been applied, we'll click on preview and save. So what we'll do now is we'll go back and look at our dashboard to see if the changes have been applied. they are not. So let's go back in the page and see what change we have to make now. Let's get inside this report. Oh, we forgot to pick one. So yeah, we will just go ahead and pick this and preview. There you see, now we can see this nice chart here, and we can do some settings around how the chart looks. We can click on Chromeless, save, and go back in our dashboard view. And you will notice that we get this nice chart that we have created for the same report, which tells us the segregation of the first-time loan applicants and the second time. So we can click on each section and actually see that report. So this is the report for the first-time loan applicants. And if I click on the other pie of the chart, it shows me for the second timers. So similarly, we have several different options of representing the same data. For example, I can have a bar chart, or I can have a pie chart, just we had, or the column chart. To do that, we just click on the bars and we give it the title, let's say bar chart, and click OK. And this is how the bar would look like. We can save and then embed this chart on our dashboard, just like how we did for the pie chart. And not just the pie chart, bar chart, we also have several different options that we can have lines, we can have dots, and we can have several of the representation of the same report data, but in a different view. So these are some of the concepts that we have when we are working with the advanced reports. And there's one more thing I want to point out, and this is also one of the ways in which we use reports. That's by calling these reports outside of decisions. So we come to the report designer and we click on configuration, configure integration, select API service, mention the data format, let's say JSON, done, and click view. Now what decisions does is it generates the endpoint for us so that we can call this report and get the information. So this is the get link and this is the post link. And in the output, we will be getting the JSON load of all the data. So we can click on test and hit run. As you can see, we'll get the JSON array of rows. And these are all the information which we had, which you can use in your external applications or in any of those which you have. So I go back into my report designer and recap some of the things that we saw. So we learned how to create report, how to add filters, how to establish parent-child relationship, how to add conditional formatting, how to add color rules, and how to add these things on the dashboard so that we can create a view for a particular user. So with that, we'll close this session. I hope you had some good learning about the advanced reports in Decisions version 8.